Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. How are you today?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Oh,
a little
great.
better after a win last night.
Oh.
Get a little tight at the end, but we got through it.
Oh, that was a great win, Mike. Any win over the Yankees, as you know, is a great one for the Mets. You were somebody, one of the reasons why I loved you when you first got here was because you were somebody who thrived in the Subway Series. Do you have a favorite moment in particular, and what was it about the Subway Series that brought out the best in you?
Well, I think first off, just the intense emotion of those games. And I personally really enjoyed playing in Yankee Stadium as a visiting player. I mean, the only way before interleague play obviously would have been the World Series. And we all know how difficult it is to win a World Series, let alone get there as well. So I loved it. I mean, it was something for me. It just really triggered me and really ignited my competitiveness. And let's be honest, the season itself is a marathon. So anytime you can do something in the middle of a season to really bring up your intensity and your emotion was something that I enjoyed. And as players, we really enjoyed it kind of maybe pre-social media era where it was just you're watching the news stories about the houses divided, the civil wars. Like my dad's a Yankees fan and my brother's a Mets fan. And we just enjoyed that. But one particular moment, I mean, obviously the home run, with the Matty Franco pinch hit game, I think was probably one of the coolest times because it was just so intense. It was a national game, that televised game, and just squared that ball up pretty well. So it was a great game, and obviously I crushed that ball, so it was fun.
Mike, it's good to have you on, man. I want to actually, just for a second, because we're going to be obviously New York heavy here, but I want to take you back to the beginning of your journey. This is fascinating to me because, in my opinion, you probably won't say this. I'll say it for you. There's different levels of the Hall of Fame. You're in the top level. You're one of the all-time greatest catchers. There's just no doubt. I mean, you hit 350. I mean, it's just crazy what you did. And yet, we know the story. Been drafted as a favorite, if you will, 62nd round. And the scouts, they got the stopwatch. What do you run, the 60? What's the pop time? I understand that scouting is subjective, but how can you do what you did as a pro and be so wildly, irresponsibly overlooked by so many scouts during the formative stage of your baseball development? How does that happen?
Well, I think when I was a kid, and it probably is still prevalent today, they used to tell us catching and left-handed pitching was the quickest way to the big leagues. And I think being a slow-footed first baseman in high school, and granted, I mean, I had some good years in high school and junior college before I converted to catcher. But I think just once I started catching and then continued to mature and then go into the Dodgers system that had incredible coaching. I mean, I had Johnny Roseborough as my catching coach and Kevin Kennedy and Reggie Smith as my hitting coach. So in high school and junior college, I did have some ability, but I think it just really took off because I was in the right place at the right time. I switched positions because the Dodgers had signed Henry Rodriguez, if you remember him, and Eric Karros. And I went to instructional and they said, listen, if you don't do another change positions, you're going home. So
wow,
it was kind of like I better change positions.
Yeah.
So I think just having perfect timing, the right instruction, and the right coaching, and just was able to continue to refine my hitting. And just again, it's a crooked path, but nonetheless, I would take it, no question.
And obviously, it culminates. It didn't culminate in New York, but I mean, you did end up a Met, and it was a weird road to get there. The fallout with the Dodgers, trading you to the Marlins. When you first got traded to New York, because you were going through hell, I'm assuming, right, with all the stuff that went with L.A. and then getting traded from there, you didn't know that New York was going to be the final destination at that time. Where were you at mentally after what went down to the Dodgers, then the Marlins, and then to New York?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I tell people all the time what a culture shock, because it went from living on the beach in California and walking down to the beach volleyball championships and, having some breakfast and then going to the ballpark in a very laid back environment and excelling. I think at that time in my life, I mean, can you imagine coming up as a rookie in Los Angeles and making a little money, and living on the beach and all the fun.
Yeah, we can, Mike.
Of that is.
We can only imagine
buddy,
it. You did it.
us.
I have the record. I didn't pay for a beer in 2 years at Harry O's in Manhattan Beach. So let's just say it was a fun time. We really enjoyed it. And then having that contract, as you said, having that fallout, and then being traded. And I remember going on the plane to St. Louis where the Marlins were, and I'm just saying to myself, what did I just do? What just happened here? And then eventually going to New York and being in the pressure cooker that was the Big Apple. But I think in the beginning, of course, I mean, we probably know the story. I wouldn't say I necessarily struggled. I just wasn't driving in the big runs. And I think the fans expected more, and I expected more out of myself. And I think it transformed me and made me into more of an intense player, made me understand how appreciative I have to be of what I have and try to seize the moment. And just at the end of the day, in my heart, I realized I had to go all in New York, and eventually was embraced and had some great years and had some great teams and amazing teammates. So it was a dream come true. And even though there was moments of frustration, you're always going to go through the roller coaster here emotionally. That's just part of being in the Big Apple. And so it was the greatest time of my life. It's something I'll obviously never forget.
We're talking to Hall of Famer Mike Piazza, 12 All-Stars, 10 silver sluggers. Insane. All right, so Mike, Soto's Soto. Torres is Torres on the opposite end of the spectrum here. I'm talking about players who are chasing new contracts, right? And obviously from the Mets perspective, which is what I'm most interested in for you, is Pete. You know, trying to compartmentalize, digging into the box and hitting that blur that's moving 95 off in 100 now, and it's moving, and you got people cheering and booing, and you're talking to your agent during the day. How do you think so far Pete has handled this contract year?
Well, it's difficult for me to say because you can't look inside a guy's head and seeing what he's thinking and sort of how he's preparing. And personally, again, I can only speculate. We can only speculate. I hope that he's not feeling like he has to overperform. I hope he's not feeling like he has to sort of expand the strike zone and get the big hit every time to sort of earn it. I think when you go out there and you test the market, you're going to be subject to a little pressure. I mean, let's be honest. That's just the way it is. He's playing for a contract, and I was in the same boat. And there was a certain time when I was here, and I just had to kind of understand that we choose the path that we chose, and you got to live life without a rearview mirror and surrender to it. And hopefully he's able to kind of have a good finish and really put the team on his back at times and punch through and get some big hits, because this game is difficult enough just playing without the pressure of a contract. And then obviously being in New York, it's magnified even more. So, but at the end of the day, listen, I'm also a believer in faith and fate. And if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, sometimes change in life is difficult. I've been through it, and I hope that because again, guys that hit, capable of hitting 50 home runs, 45 home runs, they're not walking down the street. So he's a special player when he's on top of his game. And I hope, and because he came up through the Mets, he's a Met through and through. I hope they work it out and he's able to put all this behind him and have some great productive years. That's what I'm praying for.
It might not be fair, Mike. We're talking about Mike Piazza, but since you came to the Mets in '98, for me personally, I have judged every top player on the team to what you did, and I refer to them as Piazza-like moments. It could be Alonso, it could be David, right? Whoever it may be. I'm like, I need to see if you're going to be that star. I want Piazza-like moments. What was it about? I mean, dude, Hoffman, Wagner, the 9/11 stuff, the Subway Series, the Braves home run and the big comeback off of who'd you hit that off of? Was it Mulholland at the time? The one you
one down the line.
Yeah, the one you ripped down the left field. I forget who it was.
Yeah, that was Mulholland.
Yeah, and I was at
Cutter.
I couldn't that went out in a hurry and the place was nuts. Like I almost left that game because I can't take the beatings that the Braves are handing this team anymore. But then that comeback and you finished it off. How the hell were you able to provide so many moments moments. It seemed every single time. Matter of fact, Game 5 of the 2000 World Series against Rivera, the final out, I thought you got it. I thought it was gone. I left the upper level thinking, I'll see you tomorrow, and I didn't realize that, Bernie was going to catch the ball. But every big moment, maybe except for that one that fell just short, you were able to deliver. How?
I think just preparation. And when I was coming to the ballpark every day, I visualized those moments. And when I teach hitting to kids, I tell these guys, listen, you have got to want to be up in the when the game is on the line. You have got to want to be the man in that situation. And let's be honest, some players shy away from it. Mentally, some guys just can't handle it. And that's just something for me that I had that special gift of hunger, of wanting to be the guy up there with the game on the line. And consequently, it'd also be on the pitching side. I mean, the best pitchers in history are the guys that want to be on the bump when the game is on the line as well. So I don't know. Is it learned or is it just gifted? I have no idea. I mean, it was just something for me. First off, you have to be prepared. So when I was going over the scouting reports and I was looking, I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to get this guy at this point in the game if the game is close. So I did do some homework, if that makes sense. I wasn't just going up there and hoping. When I taught the Italian team in the Classic last year, I say hope is not a strategy. I mean, I say a bad plan is better than no plan at all. So have a plan, be hungry, visualize yourself in those situations, and crave to be in those situations. And, I was taught, as I said, by Reggie Smith, and he used to have this expression. He used to say, hit it like you live, hard and in the alleys. And he said the home run hitters are driving. And this was back, he's dating myself, 70s, right? He would say, hey, man, he'd say those home run hitters, they're driving the Cadillacs, baby. And he goes, those singles hitters, they're driving the BBWs.
Oh, man.
It was really funny, those expressions. But I learned from that. I mean, that was part of my upbringing, and I learned from the best. And so ultimately, that was what propelled me and helped me get to those moments as well.
And you've had so many of them. And I know a lot of people reference the post 9/11 home run, which I know meant more than just the game, or we could talk about the Yankee stuff as we did. For me, and I've heard you talk about this, whether it would be on SNY with Gary, Keith, and Ron years ago, or in your book, I read about it. I've tweeted you about it. My favorite home run that you ever hit, Game 6, 1999 NLCS. Mets were down in the game big. Al Leiter gave it up early on. I think it was 5-0 to Atlanta. Brian Jordan in the inning prior. I don't know if you remember this, BT. I'll never forget it because I watched Piazza like a hawk, so I knew his emotion. I could tell everything. Brian Jordan came in.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. Brian Jordan came in and took Mike out when he was standing on home plate to receive a play to get him out. Mm-hmm. He took Mike out with not a dirty slide, but an unnecessary slide. And Mike, you got up. And you had that look that he done something wrong. He pissed you off with that slide. You remember what I'm talking about?
I do, and it was funny. I remember for some reason Turk Wendell always plunked Brian Jordan. And I don't know why. And, of course, Brian, being a former football player, is the last guy you want to have coming around third base when you have the ball and there's going to be a play. Yeah, but he absolutely waffled me. I wasn't happy about it. Let's just say that.
Right. And the next inning, and I remember I called my buddy Vin Dyer. I remember watching this game. I go, Mike is going deep. And you took Smoltz deep to right center. I believe it was the next inning, if I'm not mistaken, but shortly thereafter to tie the game with the 2-run shot.
Yeah, no, I love facing Johnny. I mean, he was tough and he was competitive and he just kept throwing those hard fastballs and I was timing them. And the fortunate thing for me is I had powered off field, so I didn't really feel like I had to pull the ball in those situations. But I mean, the old Turner Field, I mean, that was hard. It was starting to it was late, obviously, and the air was a little heavy. So to hit the ball, I mean, I squared that ball up pretty good. But you're right. I definitely had a burr in my saddle there. I was not a happy camper. I was not a happy camper. And so I was able to focus that and Yeah, it was a great moment. It was a tough game, man. It was just we were so spent emotionally, and they're such a great club. They always played well, and they always really played us tough. It was a great rivalry. It was frustrating because we felt like we were really getting momentum in that series, and I think we would have faced Glav the next night. And I think if we could have got through that game, we felt like we would have punched through. And it would have been the first Subway Series, actually, instead of 2000. It would have been probably an interesting one as well if we could have played the Yankees that year.
We're talking to Mike Piazza here, BT and Sound on the Fan. So, Mike, speaking of the whole Met-Yankee dynamic, this is fun for us. We draw the lines, and this is my team, and this is my guy, and this is my stadium, and this is my stuff. So as a player, especially for you when you were here, I mean, the Yankees were, incredible most of the time. So in the Mets club,
sure.
Yeah, I mean,
They were great, yeah.
But was it spoken that these Yankees, I don't want to say that you guys felt inferior. I don't mean it like that, but that was that felt in the Met organization?
Well, of course, at that time there was a big competition, like for the back pages of the papers. There wasn't social media. So I think maybe, as I've said before, we're kind of dating ourselves. So there was a little bit, and the newness of it, I think, as well, was also kind of prevalent, the actual Subway Series, because interleague play was still fairly new. And I think, look, we always had respect for their teams. You always have a certain amount of professional respect. And as I've said before, the course of a long season, you do have to keep things in perspective. But I think you'd be lying to say that you wouldn't get up for those games. I mean, if you couldn't get excited for these games, then you should be doing something else. But as far as professional jealousy or sort of like a hatred in the sense that we just didn't we had bad blood? Not really. I mean, we had great respect for their players, and they had good teams. And the fact that we felt that these games were really exciting for the city and the fans embraced it made it even that much more kind of special.
You talk about the Subway Series and the World Series, and I remember I was at Game 2 at Yankee Stadium, and when I tell you, Mike, I legitimately almost jumped out of the upper tier onto the field level to go kill Roger Clemens myself. That's the emotion I was feeling. You were calm, cool, collected, trying to figure out what the hell was going on there. You have any regrets as to how you handled that situation and to what went down there in Game 2 with Clemens throwing that bat toward you?
You know what's funny? As I was talking about this the other day, and as I get further away from it, I think maybe there's different things about that moment kind of come to life, or at least rekindles my memory. And the weirdest thing about it, because I was thinking, I knew that at that time he was going to start coming in on me and force me to hit the ball inside. Obviously, when he hit me, I mean, I'm sure I'm lucky I'm alive from that because it almost took my head off. But from a pitching perspective, I do believe he was going to start coming in more because the pitches I was hitting off him were obviously down and over the plate. And I remember actually Mike Borzello, who was our pitching coach for Italy last year, the WBC, who was with the Yankees with Joe Torre many years, was telling me some stories about it. But putting all that aside, the freakiest thing that I think now is that the bat that I had that night was actually probably had a hairline fracture in it that I didn't really know about, because even though the ball was up and in, rarely you see a bat explode like that. Usually it just kind of cracks on the handle or just so
splinters
there
up.
Was, I said to myself, everyone's like, do you have any regrets? I go, yeah, I actually regret I didn't take another bat, because maybe that bat had, maybe some C4 in it inside. So maybe if it didn't, disintegrate like that, that moment would have never happened.
It's funny.
Listen,
I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
No. Go ahead.
It's funny you say that, because last night I was watching the game in the SNY newsroom with one of your former teammates, Jerry Blevins, and he was saying that you had the thinnest bat handle that he'd ever seen. And last night, after he said that, it was the first time that it jogged my mind of saying, you know what, maybe that's part of the reason why the bat splintered the way that it did at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, I used a variation. It's called a C243, which is a Rod Carew. He actually, that actual model was developed by Rod Carew with Louisville, and then I used the Mizuno bat, and I did whittle the handle down a little bit more. So I like the real, like a sledgehammer, like a top-heavy bat. And so, yeah, I mean, but sometimes you just don't know, like you hit one and there could be a hairline fracture in there. You just don't hear. But yeah, that was a weird thing as well. So I started actually thinking about that. I'm like thinking, man, maybe because generally, as I said, that was just a weird way the bat broke. And it's history, people love to talk about it. Obviously, on a bigger sense, I've said before, the home run I hit against Jeff Nelson in that game is one that will never get attention. But I was talking with Todd Zeal yesterday at an event here, and I was saying, that's one of my most proud home runs because Jeff Nelson was so difficult on right-hand hitters.
Ugh.
And to kind of think, okay, I'm going to cheat on this pitch and look for an inside fastball, and I got it, hit it off the foul pole. That was something, was a special moment, which will always be overshadowed, unfortunately.
All right, so Mike, I want to bring it back to one more thing about the bat incident. So Sal asked about the regret, and you said maybe you had a hairline fracture, and you wish that you knew that and it wouldn't have splintered. I got that. You're a humble guy. You're a man of faith. Got it. You had every reason and every license to go out there and try to beat the crap out of Roger Clemens that night. You did, and I'm a Yankee fan. And I thought Torrey's explanation was weak. I never bought Roger Clemens' explanation. I thought he was so in the wrong, and it was so dangerous. Now, I'm sure from your perspective, it's not like it's a ball coming at you, which is scary enough. It's a bat, which never happens. So you probably weren't in the mental space that you would be in to maybe even do that. Understood. But in hindsight, I'm going to ask you again with a regret. Do you even know it was the World Series? What he did to you? Do you not regret charging the mound or not doing it?
Well, that's it. It's everything you said before then, I would say is 100% accurate. And then another thing is I truly went out there, and if I felt like if he would have said, hey, get the hell out of here, get the F, whatever the case may be, we probably would have ended up fighting. But the fact that there was so much confusion, and he was obviously kind of like the kid that broke the window, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he just kind of snapped, and people, and obviously he was a little bit in shock himself. And even Charlie Relaford, I remember the umpire, because he said, oh, I thought it was the ball. And then Charlie looked at me and goes, what is he talking about? And I was like, I don't know. It was bizarre. So I think the fact that it was so confusing and shocking, but I can assure you, if I was walking out there and he would have said, go back in the box, get whatever the case, or started becoming more aggressive, we probably would have ended up fighting, and God knows what would have happened. I mean, he's a big guy. I'm a big guy. Who knows? It could have been one way or the other. But I also, in the back of my mind, felt like, if I would have got dumped or thrown out of a World Series game and my spot came up late in the game with a couple guys on, then it could have been a different story as well. People would have been like, you're selfish, you were too proud, you were too macho, and you should have came up, you hurt your team by, attacking him, or whatever the case may be. So fortunately I had the presence of mind and realized, listen, I kind of had to remain calm. And if he was coming at me or being aggressive, like saying profanity, we probably would have ended up. But since there was that confusion and there wasn't that sort of intense moment, it unfolded the way it did.
God, it still gets me going emotionally because I remember the initiation of it during the day-night doubleheader. And when he drilled you in the head, I took a wiffle ball back to my stereo because I was so angry that happened. I did. I broke him. I was like, "What are you doing? We got you that for Christmas." I busted. I could not. Now I admit, unlike you, Mike, I couldn't keep my emotions in check. So I give you credit, but it was clearly on purpose. You owned Clemens every time you faced him.
Owned him. He
comes up and in, hits you in the head. You fall back. The eyes are rolling back. It was scary, obviously, and I was livid. And then the follow-up to that was the Subway Series. So emotions were running high. I do, on one aspect, give you credit for staying cool. Somebody on the bench could have done something about it. Like, it was just a weird situation. It was unfortunate, more so that the Mets ended up losing the game. As you said, you hit the bomb off of Nelson. Jay Payton hit a home run off of Rivera, but unfortunately it wasn't enough in that game. And it was, look, you ended up losing the series, but people reference that moment. I'll tell you this, Mike, to this day, I don't know where your relationship is with Clemens. I'd take him out. If I see him on site, I'm going at him.
Have you seen him?
Well, right Right now, it would probably look like two old cows rolling in the field if we were. It would be like no one would pay attention, or on the golf course. Listen, I mean, again, I think the interesting thing was that whole series for us really didn't get off to a good start, because you remember the Todd Zeile home run that just literally was like 3 inches from going out.
Did you see, Mike? Did you see Vientos last night, his home run that hit the top of the wall?
Yeah, no, that was
so.
I was there, and
right,
it was great.
So I'm sitting next to Zeile last night at SNY, and instantly he goes, "Now, why couldn't mine have done that in the World Series?"
Yeah, exactly. And Timo Perez, getting thrown out, I think he just obviously had a little bit of a brain cramp there, and it was because we had momentum going into that series, and I feel that's the biggest regret for me. Is I feel like if we would have kept that momentum and that ball would have gone out, it's just one of those things. But, as a player, I say this, as a man of faith, you just got to thank God for what you have, not for what you don't have. And we had a great team and great memories, and even though that was a very frustrating moment, and a lot of things could have happened differently, it is the past. And, fortunately, the teams at this point is playing better, and hopefully they can kind of scratch into the playoffs this year or further, and hopefully, win a World Series. It's been a long time for the Mets, so hopefully we can get another one.
BT and Sal on the Fan with Mike Piazza, WFAN, WFAN FM, WFAN HD1 New York, and Odyssey Sports Station.
So, Mike, before we let you go, and you kind of let us there here, as Mike Piazza, of course, BT and Sal on the Fan, you say you hope the Mets can become a playoff team. You know what a playoff team looks like. You know what one doesn't. Not that that's always accurate. You can be, betrayed sometimes by what you think you see or know. Top to bottom, though, the bad start, how hot they are now, does this Mets team look like a playoff team?
Well, listen, to back up a little bit, I think obviously the criteria has changed a lot since when I played. There's more chances to get in. And as you've seen in the last few years, a lot of teams that have been really highly regarded going in and have good records have been beaten in the first round, because on any given day, any team can win a short series. But I've seen them at their best. I think they're a good team when they're playing well. I think they just have to stay away from those tough moments. I'd love to see a couple of guys, start to get it going, if that makes sense, and get a little more momentum. And again, that was a tough game last night with the bullpen. The bullpen has to be healthy. I'm avoiding a yes or no question.
We can tell.
But,
it sounds like no.
Are they capable? Are they capable of reaching the playoffs? I think they are. But they still have to work on some things, and they have to really have that team come together and gel, and they have to do the little things well. But the way it's set up, you never know. If they can keep playing at this pace or for a while and limp back and get into that situation, it seems like there's a lot of teams that can do it. But I think, why not the Mets? Why not?
Mike, it is a pleasure talking to you. I've had the fortune of meeting you a couple of times. I've told you how much I love you. When the Mets, and this is a true story, I don't know, BT, if I told you this, and I might have told Mike, maybe not. I broke up with my first ever girlfriend around May 18th, 1998, something around there. And the Mets traded for Mike Piazza May 22nd, 1998. Mike, that's a trade I'd make every single time. Thank you for the memories. Who cares? See you, Marissa. We got Mike Piazza. Mike, seriously, thank you so much for all the moments you provided. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. It's been a pleasure to be able to meet you a couple of different times. We love you, and thank you again for your time today. We really appreciate it.